Ending things is hard, and films and TV shows are no different. The number of disappointments being legion, ranging from the rank bad writing of Game of Thrones and the Star Wars sequels to the indefinite open-ended nature of something like The Sopranos or The Devil Inside, which seriously asks you to visit a website for more information, which has to be one of the worst endings of anything ever. I want to talk about an ending that I've increasingly noticed is a problem with virtually anything on Netflix these days. An ending that has this conversation play out as soon as the credits roll. Is that it? I guess there's a season 2. It's the "is that it" ending, which is probably easier to define by what it isn't than what it is. There are many kinds of ending, but the "is that it" ending is probably close to 2. Cliffhangers and open-ended. Let's tackle cliffhangers first. When I was a kid, I was a huge fan of the Adam West Batman TV show, and nearly every episode, if not every episode, would end on a cliffhanger where Batman and Robin were captured by one of the villains, and the narrator would ask you to tune in next week to see if Batman survived. Now, even as a kid, I knew Batman was going to survive, and not only survive, but escape within the first 30 seconds of the very next episode. I never found that disappointing in any way, because I wanted to see how he escaped more than whether he would, and I had the standards of a 5-year-old. With a cliffhanger ending, there is an immediate unresolved threat that you, as an audience member, wish to see resolved. It acts as a hook that brings you back for the next episode or sequel. Which brings me to exactly what pushed me to make this video, when at the end of Three Body Problem, my wife turned to me and uttered those 3 words. "Is that it?" Not the only time she says that. Now, I kind of enjoyed Three Body Problem, mainly because I like sci-fi, especially hard sci-fi, that takes theoretical science and extrapolates that out into a fictional reality. In Three Body Problem, a Chinese scientist invites an alien race to come and invade Earth because she's bitter and angry at her treatment by the communist regime during the Cultural Revolution in China. She starts an alien worship cult with the help of a billionaire, and they treat the aliens as if they are gods that will come to save us from ourselves. Now, of course, it quickly transpires that the alien race are in fact hostile and view humans as bugs who need to be wiped from the face of the universe, with the rest of Season 1 being devoted to our plan to infiltrate the alien race's invasion fleet, which fails miserably, with this failure leaving us on a cliffhanger of an ending of a very impending alien invasion in 400 years' time, meaning the human race has ample time to come up with and fail at another few hundred plans before we get to the nail-biting stage of this narrative. The lack of any immediate threat means it fails entirely as a cliffhanger ending for me. Even the failure of the plan works to make this less of a cliffhanger, because had it succeeded, we'd have at least had the anticipation of meeting the alien race in Season 2 and seeing how the infiltration of their fleet went. Instead, we have what is a very open ending, but I think it even fails to adequately be that either. Probably one of the most famous, and depending on your outlook, disappointing open endings in TV history is that of The Sopranos, where Tony arrives at a diner, selects Journey's "Don't Stop Believing" from the jukebox console at his table, and then one by one, the members of his family arrive and sit down, start to eat and engage in small talk with only his daughter Meadow missing. Just as she pushes the diner door open, the bell tolls. Tony looks up and blackness for 10 whole seconds before the credits start to roll. That's your lot. One of the greatest shows of all time over, folks, with an ambiguous ending. Is Tony dead? Is he alive? What the hell just happened? Well, when you marry what is happening in that scene with the visual language of film, it's pretty obvious that Tony is in fact dead. Everything in that scene is building towards those 10 seconds of blackness and training the audience to expect a shot from the point of view of Tony every time the door opens and the bell rings. Every time one of his family enters, we get a shot of Tony's view of the door, except when Meadow enters and we get blackness. The obvious implication being because that is what Tony is seeing at that moment, because he is very much dead. Is the lack of a definitive answer and a scene where Tony goes out in a hail of bullets disappointing for some? Obviously, yes, but there's still some form of answer the audience can pass from the ending with a little bit of thought being applied. Also, open-ended, ambiguous endings work best when they are the definitive ending, when the audience know there is no more and the ultimate fate of the characters is therefore up to their interpretation. Is valid endings don't work as ambiguous open-ended endings because they aren't the end, they are usually the end of the beginning. So you, as an audience member, really have to stretch your imagination to get any form of satisfaction from them. In The Free Body Problem, the first season basically sets up the alien invasion and the initial human response to it. The ending leaves everything up in the air and nothing much is answered. It's a deeply unsatisfying way to end a narrative because there's no real resolution and the one big narrative hook has hundreds of years until it is a real threat. Another example of this was Leave the World Behind, a Netflix original movie from the back end of 2023, where we spent 142 minutes building to a climax that was there. There is no climax. The fate of these characters you spent 2+ hours with is left hanging in the balance and not in a way that you could pass a resolution in your mind. No, it just ends with all breaking out like they forgot to write the other 2/3 of the story. I think that is the nub of what Is That It ending is. It's an ending that feels like it just set up a story that is never going to arrive, or may never have arrived if Netflix cancels the show and leaves you deeply unsatisfied as a result. So now I've explained the what, let's look at the why. Why are these kind of endings seemingly becoming more popular, especially on Netflix? I think it's just the nature of things now to be a franchise or a long-running series, even if it only really makes sense for it to be a standalone film or a limited run. So what happens is the writers are busy setting up the franchise universe in the first season. They forget to write a compelling narrative for it, leaving the audience to decry, is that it? Especially seeing as more often than not, these shows and films then flop and never get a resolution. It's like writers are so busy building the roof, they forget to build the foundations for it to stand on. Which brings me to my second point, which is kind of linked to the first. Back in the day, a TV series full order was 24 episodes. Now it's 8. Of course, back when it was 24 episodes, you had time to flesh out a full complicated narrative and also throw in a few filler episodes for good measure. Now a show like Free Body Problem barely has the time to scratch the surface of the narrative, set up the world and all of the many characters in 8 episodes. So it's no surprise that many of these shows feel like the end of the beginning, because in a traditional sense, 8 episodes would probably be about where a series would end Act 1 of its overarching storyline. Which brings me to my last point. That being, endings are just hard. There are way more disappointing endings to series than there are brilliant ones, purely because it's much easier to set something up than pay it off in a satisfying manner. Hell, J.J. Abrams has made a whole career out of doing exactly that. Thanks for watching, hit the like or dislike buttons as you please, and maybe even consider leaving your thoughts in the comments and or subscribing.